In this subsection, we're having a look at vehicles crossing an intersection but traveling in the same direction. Just because vehicles are traveling in the same direction doesn't mean that it's without incident. In the following animations and real-life clips to follow, we'll see the different scenarios that give rise to problems that we need to be aware of. In the first animation, we have a couple of vehicles waiting at the intersection for the traffic light to go green. Now notice in the animation where the potential problem arises. There we have the driver of the red vehicle coming from a compulsory turning lane and deciding to go straight instead. Perhaps he had seen these vehicles waiting at the intersection, thought he'd try and bypass them, move into this lane, and then shoot ahead of them to get to the front of the queue. That could have been a possible reason for his behavior. So when we're at an intersection and we're about to pull off, be aware not only of vehicles traveling at right angles to the direction that we're traveling. We've covered those dangers in a number of previous videos, but also be aware of the dangers coming from vehicles traveling in the same direction as what we are. So take note of everything that's happening around you 360 degrees. In the real life clip, what I've done is I've taken these GPS coordinates and used this area as the satellite image in the animation just prior to this real life clip. So we're looking at the actual area that we saw in the animation. Now this is the compulsory right hand turn that we saw in the animation, and just as per the animation, we've got a vehicle that comes from this lane, decides to go straight instead and cuts in front of the camera. Fortunately, in this case, karma catches up with the perpetrator. In the next animation, unlike the vehicle that came from this compulsory turning lane, a similar thing could happen, but from the inner lane, that's a compulsory turning lane, driver decides to go straight instead, shoots ahead of the camera but causes an incident. So the real life clip, which demonstrates what we've seen in the animation, I'll just progress it to this point that we can see the road markings. Stop it there. So the camera had chosen this lane, which means that he has the right of way to either go straight or turn to the right, whereas this lane is a compulsory turning lane. So the driver of this vehicle should be turning left, but decides instead to cut across into this lane ahead of the camera. If you're the driver of a vehicle, such as we see here, and you realize that you are in the wrong lane, then rather be courteous and wait to see if there are any vehicles coming down the lane that have the right of way. Once it's clear, then it's fine. Go across into this lane, but don't try and shoot ahead of these vehicles. Now notice what this driver does. Shoots ahead of the camera. And then, just to add insult to injury, now turns into this little parking area. So now further holds up the camera. Instead of just waiting for the vehicles to clear, then you come across into this lane, and in this way you don't interfere with the flow of traffic at all, and you're being considerate and courteous. In the next animation, we see once again a vehicle crossing the lane. So we saw in the two previous animations a vehicle coming from a compulsory turning lane but going straight instead. In this particular animation, we see that the driver of the red vehicle doesn't stick to his lane. So both lanes that we see vehicles in here can go straight, but this driver crosses over the lane into the path of the driver of the green vehicle. Be cautious of that, especially where the road markings aren't as clear, or perhaps it's been raining and the sun is reflecting off the road surface so that the markings aren't that clear, and there's a likelihood that a driver adjacent to you or next to you might be crossing over into your lane. So just be aware of that. Don't just assume that you're safe to go and that other drivers will do the right thing. In the real life clip, you can see that the truck driver has started creeping over into the lane of the driver of the black vehicle. So he could have stuck to his lane, but there's no clear road markings, and so he's just drifted over. But there could be different areas where maybe it's a little bit more tricky. In the one area that I find myself in, there are road markings, but the road doesn't, when it crosses the intersection, the road markings aren't straight. There's a slight curve as it follows the road shape. And often drivers come from the right lane and they cross over into the left lane because of the slight curve that takes place in the road. So where you're familiar with a situation that could be potentially hazardous, always be extra cautious in that case. This is another scenario where vehicles are traveling in the same direction, but because of a vehicle overshooting the side road and connecting with a driver or a vehicle that's adjacent to you, that's going to redirect the path or the trajectory of such a vehicle and cross over into your lane, causing a potential problem. That's what we see here. Driver of the red vehicle has overshot, collides with the driver of the blue vehicle, and redirects the vehicle into the path of the green vehicle. Exactly the situation in this real life clip. This last clip I've included because it's a bit of an anomaly. Not much the camera could really have done here, but notice what takes place. So there we have a driver that's speeding through the intersection, probably inebriated, passed so close to the camera that actually caught the wing or the side mirror, knocked it off. The camera was well to the side of the intersection within his lane, but this driver is obviously under the influence and just shoots across the intersection and had clipped the camera. Please like, subscribe, and get notified.